Hello and welcome to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. Conversations where we stay curious for a little longer about the issues, challenges and opportunities which we are facing in our schools and in our communities. So whether you're walking, running, cooking or just relaxing, I hope that you're ready for a compelling conversation with today's guest, Linda Berlot. In this episode, we're going to be staying curious about team coaching, what it is, what it's not, and amongst other things, how it can be an antidote for team burnout. I'm actually going to start this episode though with a question, really important question. The question is this: what keeps us healthy and happy as we go through our lives? This is the question that Robert Waldinger, director of the 85-year-old study on adult development at Harvard, starts his 2016 TED Talk, What Makes a Good Life? And it's already had 25 million views. I will offer you an answer to that question towards the end of the show. But now I've aroused your curiosity, let me introduce today's guest, Linda Berlot. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Kai. It's great to be here.
Fantastic to have you on the show. And Linda is CEO of the Berlot Group, and she's also CRR Global Director for Faculty Development, responsible for the development of all of CRR's international trainers. Quite a responsibility. Linda is also a team coach and coaches C-suite leadership teams across a wide range of industries. Linda's been coaching for 17 years, and during that time she's coached close to 500 teams. That's quite a caseload. Well done, Linda, and really pleased to have you with us today, joining us from Dubai. How is your week shaping up?
I'm delighted to be here, Kai. Thanks for inviting me. Ramadan started this week, and so I'm absolutely thrilled. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I think it's quite a magical time. There's something quite special about what gets created in our environment and our society when you have, thousands and thousands of people consciously and intentionally focusing on their spirituality and on how they want to show up during this time. Honestly, it's magical. I think there's magic that gets created in the emotional field between us.
It is a very special time indeed. I completely agree with that. You've used an interesting phrase there, emotional field. For our listeners who are not familiar with that term, could you please just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think you might be right. The term people might not be familiar with, but most people are quite familiar with what it is. The emotional field is nothing more than the energy that gets created between two or more people. And being able to feel it is very useful. We all can feel it, but sometimes we're not conscious about that. For example, imagine walking into a boardroom when there's been quite a heavy argument. You can feel the atmosphere. You know that saying, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. Or
Yeah.
you go to dinner and the couple next door is busy falling in love. Even though you can't hear what they're saying, you can feel it in the air around them. So the emotional field is nothing more than the atmosphere or the energy between us that gets created by all of us when we come together.
And what I'm noticing in Amman, I've been here for nearly 13 years, in Ramadan, what seems to be in the emotional field is a great sense of community combined with a huge outpouring of generosity. And that's just a lovely environment to be part of. And if you haven't, I think, been in this part of the world during Ramadan, it's probably quite hard to convey what that means.
Absolutely. I also think that it's such a peaceful time. Everybody's so mindful to be calm and manage their anger and show up in a peaceful way. It's really beautiful.
I'm also curious, as someone who's been working in Dubai for quite a while, Linda, you've now moved to a 4.5-day week. How is that affecting people's well-being? What impact is that having on maybe the clients you work with? Does that affect the emotional field at all?
I would say yes. I don't know that every company has moved to a 4.5 day work week, but there's lots of evidence that shows that people are more productive when they have a better work-life balance.
Okay. And that might impact on the emotional field at the workplace and maybe at home as well.
Absolutely. People are happier to be spending more time at home. On a Friday is a very special day in this part of the world because people pray. There is a very important prayer that happens at midday on a Friday. So given the opportunity to really focus on what's important and reconnect to people's values or to God or to your spirituality is really important. I think it impacts not just the family and our social environment, but being allowed to do that also contributes to team members feeling happier about their workplace and their employers.
So do you think there's a chance the UAE might move to a 4-day week? I think as has happened in Sharjah recently. Is that on the cards, do you think?
I don't want to speak for the UAE. I know that I'm desperately trying to have that happen in my organization
Okay.
because it's important. Yeah.
Let's move into team coaching then. This is what we really want to talk about today. And let's just start off with some basics, I guess. Team coaching, what is it? What is it not? And why do organizations need it? So you're particularly focused on team coaching. What is team coaching? Let's try and understand that a bit better.
That's a really great question because although team coaching is better understood than it's ever been before, there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. Very simply said, it is a process where a team coach works with a team and helps them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. The coach will work with a healthy team and move them from where they currently are now to where they want to go to. And the coach will use tools and skills and show up in a particular way that will facilitate that process.
How does team coaching differ from one-to-one coaching, Linda?
That's a great question, Kai. So one-to-one coaching focuses on the individual, really, and helping the individual change and move towards the goals that they want to. As a systemic or a team coach, I'm focusing on the system or the team as a whole, helping that team move forward. If I had to use a metaphor, imagine the metaphor of an orchestra conductor. So the orchestra conductor plays the orchestra. They don't play the individual players, even though I may have to, lower that trombone to make space for the violin in the corner. But my objective is to play the wider orchestra, and I'm always taking that wider view of the orchestra. And it's exactly the same as a team coach. The system or the team becomes my client.
Beautiful analogy there, Linda. Thank you. So I think you've touched upon this already. What would you say the purpose of team coaching is?
Well, to help a team achieve its goals. There is so much evidence that demonstrates that positivity equals productivity. And positivity, we don't mean rah, rah, rah. What we mean by positivity is that when there are high levels of safety and trust, when team members are collaborating, when they like and enjoy working together, when they have the ability to have skillful conflict and therefore work through their issues, when they can do all of those type of things, they become a lot more productive. So teams ask for team coaching exactly during some of those situations. Maybe the team is a little bit siloed, they're not collaborating as much as they would like to, or indeed there's low levels of trust. Maybe they are a multicultural team, as many teams are, actually all teams are in this part of the world. And there are lots of communication misunderstandings. These are some of the issues that prevent teams from being as productive as they could be, and also from being as happy as they could be.
Why do organizations come to you looking for team coaching? What are they actually trying to achieve what are they hoping that you will do?
I think that organizations call a team coach in because they want somebody impartial to be able to mirror back to them what the coach is seeing. So, and then help them with certain issues like we mentioned a moment ago. For example, maybe they are siloed, maybe they are misaligned, maybe there are low levels of trust. And the coach can facilitate a process where they take the team and help that team have deeper conversations, probably in ways that they've never had before, so that they can work through those challenges which are stopping them from achieving their goals.
And is it common, do you think, in organisations for teams to need this type of support, or is it very unusual?
I think it might be unusual for organizations to ask for a team coach, but it is extremely common for all teams to face the challenges that we've mentioned. I can put my hand up as a team leader. We often call a coach in to help us unstuck, because the team coach has that meta view or that bigger perspective. And sometimes when you're in it, you don't see the wood from the trees, right? So having somebody external come and facilitate that have those conversations, but also somebody impartial that doesn't take sides is very useful. So I would say all high performing teams have got a coach or a team coach at some point in their team's development. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Okay, hopefully that's getting clear for our listeners out there. Another way of exploring this understanding of what team coaching is maybe also saying, well, what is it not? So what is it not?
Absolutely. I absolutely love this question because there's so much misunderstanding about what team coaching is, and it often gets collapsed with other things. So the first thing that team coaching is not is training. As a trainer, you are the subject matter specialist. You are there to share a message, but behavior may or may not change. And that is totally dependent on the individual. With team coaching, you want behavior to change over time. It's also not one-to-one individual coaching, because we hold the team as our client, not the individuals in the team. It's not therapy or counseling, although it sometimes feels that way, because we don't shy away from talking about how we feel and talking about emotions. From a team coach's perspective, talking about emotions is not pathology. It's not wrong. We are emotional beings. And so it's extremely useful for team members to be able to name how they're feeling, and for them to hear each other talk about their emotions. It kind of softens the emotional field or creates more empathy and understanding between them. And then the last thing that it's not team building. Imagine that team building in a team building day, teams come together, they have an amazing day, they climb a mountain, or they build a ship, they have a lot of fun, perhaps a lot of awareness has been created, but there isn't behavior change that happens after that. Whereas with team coaching, you may have fun, you may not build a boat necessarily, but when you go on a team coaching journey, over time, behaviors will change so that the desired outcomes are achieved.
That, I think, really leads to my next question, Linda, about what would the practical differences be? If I'm in an organisation, I bring in yourself or I bring in a team coach, what practical differences might I start then to experience after that process? I mean, you've mentioned their behavioural change. Can you perhaps dig into that a little bit more? What type of behavioural change might I start to see in my team?
Absolutely. So as a systems coach, I often get asked by prospective clients, what is my ROI if I sign up with you? And of course, I can't calculate what your ROI is, but we can absolutely measure ROE, which is your return on effectiveness. And we can do that in different ways. But you will absolutely start to see a decrease in silos, an increase in positivity, an increase in safety and trust, an increase in collaboration. Team meetings will start and end on time, and you will work through everything on the agenda. Your team members will feel happier about holding themselves accountable, but holding each other accountable to the outcomes. And that can only happen when there is a high level of trust. But most importantly, they won't shy away from having those hard or challenging conversations that very often team members don't do. But when they do that, they will make smarter, better decisions. They will also give each other feedback freely, and become a lot more resilient during times of change. So what that means is everybody will have a voice, everybody will feel appreciated. People will not be shy about voicing their concerns because they'll feel heard and feel that their voice is valued. And when we feel part of that conversation, it's easier then for us to buy into change. So change, in times of change, there will be more resilience and less resistance.
Well, that sounds brilliant, and that sounds like a more courageous, open form of relationship experience. Some people listening out there who may be a bit skeptical of coaching. I was very skeptical of coaching a few years ago, and we'll come back to that a bit later in this podcast. But those people who might think or suspect team coaching is about being soft and fluffy, what would you say to those skeptics?
First of all skeptics are welcome because it allows us to create a conversation. And I would say to them, there is a lot of data to substantiate that the more positive a team feels, so that's the soft and fluffy stuff, the more productive they will be. And I mean, we have case studies of where some of our clients have attached a dollar value. So ROI, we were lucky to work with a bank, and they attached the dollar value to the leadership team, increasing their positivity and therefore their productivity. But also, not just that, when they came together as a team and started operating more as a high-performing team, their teams underneath them started to align to that too. So there's a lot of data to substantiate that working on the dynamics between us or the relationship between us will allow us to be more productive. Well, you can think about that, right? If you and I like working with each other, we can get through anything. We can face challenges, we can face change, we will figure it out together. But if we don't really like each other, we don't trust each other, we don't really understand each other because we're so different, and there's very little positivity between us, how can we possibly be as productive as we could be when we are more trusting?
This is all absolutely fascinating, Linda. And I'm now getting curious about your coaching evolution and how you got into this work. What was it that connected with you and team coaching in the first place? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, team coaching definitely found me, or coaching definitely found me, should I say. My background is in learning and development through and through. I've worked in corporate all of my career. And along with learning and development, I used to lead change management functions and also set up change management functions in organizations. So those two paths have always been intertwined for me. And in the last organization that I worked for, I quickly realized that you can't tell executives what to do because they know everything, right? So I was pondering how to get them to buy into some of the concepts I wanted them to. And at the same time, I have to confess that I'm a bit of a book geek. I will stand in line for hours and hours to get autographed books. And I'm saying that because I was in line for getting my book autographed by Paulo Coelho, which is an author that I absolutely love. And in that line, I met a lady. I never saw her again. We worked for the same organization. And one day I got to my desk and she said, Linda, I went on this course. You would be fantastic at this. Phone them. And I did. I call her my angel. Sometimes I believe that, I get emotional now, even just thinking about that. Sometimes I feel there are angels in our way to guide us. I picked up that call and it was as if that was the first step to the rest of my career. It was almost prophetic.
That's a beautiful story, and I'm sure Paulo Coelho would like to hear that story. I love his book, The Alchemist. I think that was a mind-changing book, I think, for me. And I'm sure he'd love to hear that he brought coaching into your life. So has that attraction changed over time at all?
No, absolutely not. The more I do this work, the more addicted I become. I suppose it's also helpful that I am Italian. I came from a loud family that did conflict in a way that was pretty unskillful. And I saw that same level of pain, well, not just in teams, but in all relationships, right? But in working in organizations, I've experienced firsthand the pain of unskillful behavior from leaders. So the way that we manage change, for example, is just to impose change and tell people they've got to jump on board. The way that we do conflict is pretty domineering and unskillful, and it causes a lot of pain. And I see that in the teams that I work with. And that absolutely lights my fire, is to teach teams, and imagine teaching leadership teams that then have probably got families and young children at home, and take that learning back into their home environments, but staying in the work environment, teaching leaders how to be more skillful around communication, how to lead multicultural teams when they are busy misunderstanding each other, and create less pain, more understanding, more heart, more empathy. You can see I get all worked up about that. I'm absolutely passionate about what I do. It's not a job for me; it's a vocation.
Well, that's such a gift, I think, isn't it, to be able to offer teams, whether they're teams in the workplace or outside the workplace, families, communities, the ability to manage and work with each other, to manage relationships more skillfully. And that wherever you are at the moment, you can actually do it better. You can do it more skillfully. How do we manage these emotions more skillfully? How do we manage these conversations more skillfully? Why wouldn't you, as a human being, want to invest in that type of skill improvement? So I can see why you get so emotional about it, because the impact then that can have on people is huge, absolutely huge.
Kai, I was about 40 when this came into my life, when coaching came into my life. Until that moment, I didn't know, and I realize we're going out to a wide audience, but maybe someone else will resonate with me. I didn't know that you could do conflict and really express your emotion in a respectful way. I didn't know that you could be angry with someone and respectful. For me, anger and conflict was war, all out war. And it was transformational when I learned that you can be angry and upset and still be skillful, express yourself in a way that doesn't wound and hurt the other person, and vice versa. And I think that is such a gift when we can put those skills in people's hands. It's an absolute gift. I feel very privileged, and I get emails from the leaders that I coach that say thank you. Not just am I a better leader, but I'm a better father, a mother, or a husband, or a wife, and a parent. And for me, that's beautiful. The work that we have, the work that we do has a ripple effect, right, out into the world.
Wow, incredible. Absolutely incredible. And if you're still listening out there and thinking, I don't believe this is just Kai and Linda getting a bit emotional about something, let me share you my story of how I went from being a skeptic about this type of work to an evangelist. So let me take you back to summer 2020. You probably don't want to remember going back to summer 2020. We're talking about August 2020. Schools had closed their doors. Students were having to adapt to remote learning, and so were their families, and that was really tough. International travel in many parts of the world had come to an abrupt halt. And my team, or one of the teams I was working with at the time, were getting ready to plan the new school year ahead online, which wasn't a great appetizing thought. And we had been, so back in March, that particular team, we'd been a really high-performing team. As we went into COVID, we were thriving. There was synergy. There was joy in our work. We were really humming. By mid-August, we were exhausted, absolutely exhausted. we were frustrated, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what the year would hold, about what it would mean for us individually, what it would mean for our school, what it would mean for our community. And I didn't know what to do. For one of the few times in my career as a leader, I didn't know what to do. And I remembered a conversation that I'd had with Arve Petrie, who was out there. I'm sure she'll be listening to this podcast at some point. And Arve had offered to me back in April. She said, "Look, I've done some team coaching training, which I'd really like to practice, and you might want to use that with one of your teams." And I said politely, "Oh, that's great, Arve. Thank you for the offer." Privately thinking to myself, yes, that's a load of rubbish, or that's not really going to be any use. I'm not going to need that, but thanks very much anyway, Arve. But there I find myself in mid-August with my team that had been high-performing in March and now was uncertain, frustrated and exhausted, and the team dynamics weren't brilliant. And I thought, well, what do I do? And I then recollected the conversation I'd had with Arve, and I thought, well, what else can I do? I'm going to phone Arve up, and I'm going to hopefully see if that offer for the team coaching is still available. And she'd been coached, now I know, by you, Linda, and your team in Dubai. And she'd gone through that coaching. That's what she was preparing to do with my team. So we started the team coaching. And all of us going to team coaching, including myself, were skeptical. It's like, why are we doing this? We've got far more important things to talk about. This is a waste of time. Anyway, we went in there, all of us as skeptics. We went into 3 2-hour team coaching sessions over a period of 6 weeks. We started that team coaching at a pretty low point. We came out of that team coaching at a very high point. We were back to being a high-performing team. And I couldn't believe it. And I wish we'd have filmed those sessions in some ways, because the impact that coaching had on us as a team was, and it's a very overused word, but it was genuinely transformational. And perhaps, Linda, if I just talk through very briefly what we went through in each of those sessions, maybe you can then comment on what Arve was trying to do with us as a team coach. So the first session we went into, there was lots of silence, and Arve was trying to get us to talk through, from what I remember, she was trying to talk through how we might work together as a team. How did we want to work together? Could we agree on why our community needed us to work together more effectively? I think it was that sort of exploration. Does that sound familiar to you as a technique?
Absolutely. I think what Ave must have been aiming to do is to get you as a team to define your rules of the road, or your team charter, and to move away from my way to your way, to creating a third cultural space, if you will, that is called our way. And by inviting everybody to speak up and contribute to this, she's starting to lower defensives and bring the team together, but starts to create a we-ness between you. So you started to feel the dynamic between you.
That's right. And we were quite resistant to that for the first hour or so. And then Arve managed to find a way of opening us up and really opening up some of the emotions which were in the emotional field, some of the emotions which were being held by the team. And once we put those emotions out there, and there was some vulnerability, quite a lot of vulnerability, we were able to move into that conversation about how we could work together. And I think now, reflecting on that 4 years later, we are now spending much more time across the school thinking about how we work together and not just what we're trying to do. Because normally you'd go into a meeting with an agenda of what you need to do. But if you don't invest time in thinking how you work together, then you can get all sorts of conflict and issues.
Absolutely. What you look at is what you get. I think we all understand this with regards to our goals and our KPIs. If we keep looking at our numbers, we will eventually get our numbers. So the what is important, of course, because teams come together to produce. But the how do we want to work together, so that the us is as important. If you don't look at the dynamics piece, you may never get to where you want to go. And I love, Kai, what you're saying is that you spend a lot more time now looking at your team dynamics, because that's important. And the fact that you're high performing now proves that what you look at is what you get. So by looking at your team dynamics, you will continue to get positive team dynamics.
Okay. We then went into the second session a couple of weeks later with probably a bit less skepticism. The emotions that were being held back by team individuals were now out there. I think that helped a lot. And like you said, we'd started to agree about how we were going to work together moving forward. We then went into the second 2-hour session, and we were on our feet. There were bits of paper on the floor, and we were doing, I think, what's possibly called the communication team toxins exercise. So we had these 4 bits of paper on the floor, and each of them had a word on them, like blaming, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. And we had to we each had to choose one of these toxins. We had to stand on one of the bits of paper, and then we had to talk from that particular toxin about how we might be experiencing that in the team. We then moved into a second bit in that second session, where we looked at what we call the antidotes to the communication team toxins, and actually understanding that there were ways of working with these toxic behaviours, which you find in pretty much any relationship. And that helped us think about the antidotes and how we could maybe work differently. So what's going on in that exercise? I mean, that was quite revelatory, I think, and quite difficult and uncomfortable at times when different team members were talking about what they were experiencing. Is that a common strategy that you use?
I think so. Ava is a very skilled coach, and I think what she was aiming to do was use one of the tools that was raised by Professor John Gottman, and he said that as human beings, we're all beautifully and perfectly imperfect and flawed. And as skillful and loving and kind as we can be, we sometimes can be extremely unskillful. And that in times of conflict, we don't fight because we have a difference of opinion. We fight because of how we treat each other. And those behaviors, although common, can break down any team or any dynamic. He calls, in his book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, he calls those the horsemen of the apocalypse, which in the Bible is a reference to the end of the world. He says that those toxins or those unskillful behaviors, we all have them, but it's important to learn about minimizing them so that we can be more skillful and have conflict which is not hurtful, which is, I think, where she was pointing you to being. And I can just imagine how enlightening it was, because while we all do these, we have blind spots. We may not be familiar that we are doing them. We also may not be aware of how toxic they are in a dynamic.
And then we moved into the third session, again, another 2 weeks later, and then we were maybe we were relieved that this was coming to an end, but we went to think that third session much more positively than the first session. And I think Ave might have called it, we're going to work on a communications and conflict protocol. And basically what that meant was, based on the experience and the learning and the conversations we'd had in the previous 2 sessions, we were now having a much more open and relaxed conversation about how we wanted to work together going forward. Does that resonate with you? Do you recognize that type of activity?
Absolutely. So high-performing teams create ground rules of how to have hard, challenging conversations before the challenge happens or before the conflict happens, so that when it does happen, they've got some ground rules to hold themselves accountable to. And I think that's what Ava was doing. She was helping you create some rules of the road, let's say, in terms of when we start to be unskillful, how do we help each other through that? How do I self-manage? What behavior can I replace my toxic behavior with? And if I am toxic, how can you help me and how can I help you when it's your turn? So teams become a lot more understanding, a lot more empathetic towards each other, but they do move away from being unskillful in times of conflict to moving more skillfully forward in a way that is collaborative.
Yes, and I think that's a very, very good way of explaining where I think we are now, if you like, 4 years on, certainly as a team and as teams across the organisation. I think we are getting more skillful at working with each other. And that particular experience for me was actually quite magical, because I started off the process, as I've explained, pretty sceptical, not wondering how this might turn out, but probably expecting the worst. But 6 weeks and 3 sessions later, that experience with Arve had transformed the way we were as a team. And it meant that then, as we move forward for the rest of that school year and beyond, we were able to deal really well with the challenges that COVID was presenting to us as a school and as a team. And we now, like 4 years later, we are, I think, well on our way in our school to creating a culture where how we describe it is where trust and dialogue inspire professional growth. And over 100 of our students and staff have been trained with some degree of coaching skills. Quite a lot of that one-to-one coaching skills, but an increasing number of us are getting team coaching skills. And what I think this is helping us do is, yes, we are more skillful in the way we work with each other. And that then is strengthening relationships right across the school. And do you remember that? And do you remember that question that I asked at the start of the podcast about the Harvard study and the question, what keeps us healthy and happy as we go through our lives? The question that Robert Waldinger asked said that study concluded after 85 years that what keeps us healthy and happy as we go through our lives? Relationships.
I can absolutely resonate to that.
Okay.
The quality of our life is seen through the quality of our relationships, absolutely.
So I guess the question for me, for me that I would put to listeners out there is, why wouldn't you want to invest in some way in improving the way that you relate to each other within your organisation and outside of your own organisation? Is that not something that's worth investing in? So we're going to move now into what's called the quickfire round. So I'm going to offer you a number of questions, I think 6 questions. And one of the phrases I've learned in team coaching with you, Linda, so you don't need me to tell you this, but you've come up with the idea of bottom lining it. Do you want to explain to listeners out there what bottom lining means?
Bottom line means speak to the essence of what you want to say. Rather than saying a lot, say less.
So this is an opportunity to practice our bottom lining. So we want a bottom line response to each of these 6 questions. So here we go then. You ready for the quick fire round?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. So the biggest leadership lesson, Linda, that you keep on having to learn is what?
That relationships matter.
Second question. A key moment in your coaching journey that made you think or lead differently?
Coming face to face with an unskillful moment and seeing the impact it had on my team.
Third question. Your favourite way to unwind at the end of a busy day as a team coach?
The gym.
The gym, not the gin.
The gym. Healthy body, healthy mind.
Brilliant. Number 4. Leadership is?
A spiritual journey.
5. The purpose of education should be to?
Empower young people how to have skillful relationships so that they can administer themselves in society.
There's a bit of a theme emerging here, isn't there? The R word. Okay, being a team coach is one of the best jobs in the world because?
You get to witness magic and transformation at a very heart level.
And we can see, I think, and we can feel how much joy that brings to you. Linda, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. And thank you also for doing the work that you do and the work that you do with others that also helps those people ripple out this amazing work that you do across the world. I, for one, am very grateful of what you've done for me personally and what you are and the work you're doing is doing for my organisation. And I'm hoping that with this podcast, we can bring more of this work to an even wider audience. But thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me to spend this very precious time with you, Kai. The work that you're doing is also extremely important.
Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem.
You've been listening to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. The podcast where we stay curious for just a little bit longer. The Educators Corner podcast is hosted by me, Kai Vacher, and produced by Stuart Pardoe, Zoe Snell and Marion James, and by BSM BSS Productions.